I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Pete. I've had experience with these steps, the way they're laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the help of my Big Book Step Study sponsor, a loving God who is revealed to me through this work, through meetings like this and people like you. I'm working on my 9-step amends, and I practice steps 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis to the best of my ability. And as a result of this work, I have had a spiritual awakening, which continues to happen every day. Thank you, Mike, for asking me to speak. I think I was here about a year ago, I know it was summer anyway. It's always great to be here, a lot of familiar faces. It's interesting because when I finished my step work, I finished reading my 5th step in November of 2014. And I know the first few times I was asked to speak, it's like I really needed to know what step we were on, so I, like as my wife says, the best surprise is no surprise for me. And I was always the type of alcoholic, I planned everything out, and my wife tells me this, planned it out like a military campaign, okay? And so, no control issues here, okay? Just so you know. But it's changed because I said, no, it's funny, because of this work, it was like, okay, here I am trusting and relying on Pete. And boy, that hasn't worked too well for me in the past. So I really need, to remember to trust and rely on God, the God of my understanding. And this is a very small exercise for me to do that. And I think it's important because for me to be prepared or to plan is I get in the way, because then it's all about me. If I let God in and ask, and I was meditating before when I got here, just quietly and just asking God to come in and give me the words that I need to share. They're not my words, and as my sponsor were telling me, the only thing I'm going to speak about today is my own experience, because that's all I have, is my own experience. I don't have an opinion. Well, I do have an opinion, but I won't share that, okay? I was always very, very forthright about sharing my opinion with everyone, and you better agree with me. So I'm just going to briefly tell you how I got to Big Book Step Study. This isn't my first go-around in AA. I first came into AA, which I thought was going to be my original sobriety date was February 6, 1982. And I thought I came in to stay. And I was around for 18 years. I had a couple of great sponsors, long-term sobriety. They were great people and great guys, and they all had wives who were also in recovery. So I had a real twofer, because if I called and my sponsor wasn't there, I could talk to his wife, and it was great because I had the benefit of their experience too. And grew up in a small town, and so I kind of did what I needed to do to stay sober. I was one of those who believed that if I wasn't drinking, that was pretty much it. My life was better because I wasn't drinking. And so I went to meetings, I got active, I did everything I thought I needed to do, and it worked for a long time. And I did a 12 and 12 group, and each week, and I thought I was doing the steps. And I did them. They were up there on the wall. I didn't realize. Someone told me later, if you do your steps off the wall, your recovery's probably going to be off the wall too. So, see, none of this is original. Okay, I've heard this before, so I have to tell you that it's not original. And so and it was, but it was good, and I relied on the fellowship. And I don't want to underestimate that at all. The fellowship is critical. It's a critical part of this. Because if we weren't all in this together, boy, I'd be screwed. So basically, long story short, after 18 years, and someone asked me what happened. Well, I kind of got away from AA meetings, got away from AA people. Well, I stopped going to meetings. I moved away, and I didn't bother to find any other support at all. And as far as working on my recovery, I never really kind of worked on my recovery. I kind of went along. I coasted, and I was living on yesterday's sobriety, okay? And so the day came, out of the blue, I said, gee, cold beer sounds good. And I said, yeah, I think I'll have two. And I was off. I was off and running. The rationalization that came into my head, my disease was telling me, you've been sober longer than you drank. You'll be fine. You know all this stuff. You're good. And I believed it. I believed those lies, okay? Didn't know what was in this book. Now, this is my original big book that I got in 1982. And as a friend of mine in my home groups originally said, well, it's in really great shape. And I said, yeah, it didn't get a lot of use. So I stayed out for 10 years. And it was a struggle the whole time. It wasn't fun. I lied to myself. I said that it was. I'd drink at better places and drink better stuff. When, of course, I was on an expense account, so that helped. When I was paying it myself, boy, believe me, it was the cheap stuff. So, so and as you might expect, that my life started to unravel. I desperately tried to hold it together. As far as and I'll get into the earlier steps before, but my way of managing or dealing with the unmanageability of my life is just to try harder. It just means I have to buckle down and really try even harder to manage it. And so after that 10 years, my wife said, because I was sober when we got together, and she'd known me sober for a long time, and she said, you need to do something. She said, this can't go on. And I knew where I needed to go. I knew that. And so I found my way back to AA. I know now through the grace of God. And I hung around for about 2 years, doing exactly what I did before. I didn't know anything else. I had no understanding that even those 18 years in AA, okay, I had removed the solution that I had to my alcoholism, which was the initial solution was drinking. Okay, that was how I dealt with my alcoholism. So I removed that solution, but I didn't replace it with anything else. I thought I was. I thought not drinking was enough, and my life was better in many ways. So there I was. Not realizing that I'd been living with untreated alcoholism, for 28 years. And even though I was back drinking, there was all those times in between drinking, and when my disease was manifesting itself. And so when I found my way back, here I was doing exactly what I'd done before, going to the open meetings, listening, and of course my mind was a real squirrel cage, because I thought I knew this stuff, but I didn't, and I hadn't lived it for so long. And even when I had lived it, I hadn't lived it very well. And I'd heard about these meetings called Big Book Step Study. And there were some very kind of derogatory terms that people used. They were the Nazi meetings, and they were like thumpers and big book thumpers and all this. And of course, as a good alcoholic, I had my resentment against Big Book Step Study, never having been to a meeting. That's my opinion, right? So therefore it must be true. And so for 2 years I had that resentment, and I'll be damned if I was going to go there, because the nerve of them not wanting to hear what amazing things I have to share. You know? I mean, do they realize what a great guy I am and how I really got all my stuff together? You know, and I've been successful and this and that, at least, you know. And then I said, you know, after 2 years, and I did the steps with another sponsor, great guy, fit the profile of, you know, he fit the job description of my previous sponsors. You know, he had long-term sobriety, great guy. He had done the steps in some way, but we didn't really talk about the steps. It's good for me. He rode a motorcycle, so there's a plus. You know, had his own business, so I could stop in and see him when I needed to, you know, because it's all about my schedule. And so it's all about me. And I did a fourth step, which, you know, again, I did it Pete's way. I did my fourth step on an Excel spreadsheet. You know, about a weekend. And I thought that was a lot. I thought that was a lot of time to put into this, you know, because I mean, what am I going to find? A dozen, maybe 20 resentments, you know? Hey, you know, I'm such a nice guy. I mean, how could I have, you know? So I got to Big Book Step Study because I realized after I'd done this fourth step with him, and I read the fifth step, and I remember looking in the book, and it was saying that something's supposed to happen after I read this to him. And, you know, nothing happened. Didn't feel any different. Felt kind of empty. And I said, you know, I think maybe I ought to go to this meeting and just listen. Just check them out, you know. I know they're wrong, but, you know, I'll go check them out, see what they've got to say. And so I did. And because of the thought that came to me is I said, you know, Pete, you know, it's funny, I talk to myself all the time, and I talk to myself out loud all the time. And my wife has mentioned that to me, and that's why I know. But I do get, you know, this message that came saying, you know, what you need is you need to just sit and listen, because you don't know. You don't know. Boy, I hope nobody finds that out. You know, because boy, they won't think well of me, or they'll think I'm, you know, a real loser. And so I went, and there and this was in Keene Big Book Step Study, which is a small meeting, and had some great people there, great sobriety, great recovery. And I saw the man who would become my sponsor, and he's described in the Big Book. He's described in the Big Book. He is that man whose whole deportment shouted that he had an answer. I didn't know quite what he had, but I wanted it. There was a peace and a serenity and a grace about him, and a kindness and a feeling of well-being that I so desperately wanted. Oh my God, I realized that this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. And so I asked him if he'd be my sponsor, and he said he'd be honored to, which kind of threw me a little bit when you know, whoa. And so we started the reading. And you've no doubt you probably heard this before. He had me start reading the doctor's opinion. And he said, you know, to, you know, underline, you know, words that you don't understand, even if you think you understand them, if you're not quite sure because they might not have the same meaning you think they do. Highlight passages that touch you or speak out to you, and so I did that, and I followed his directions. And then we would go through and we would read these together, and we'd discuss it. And again, we did it with you know, through the first readings and then we got into the second step, and I don't want to kind of keep going back, but I guess I'll have to. But we got into the second step and that reading and asked if I would be, you know, did I believe or was I willing to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity? And I had to raise my hand and said, well, you know, I have a real thing about this whole God thing. I said, I don't know if I believe. And, you know, I said, he said, well, it says, would you be willing? Are you willing? And I said, yeah. And he said, you're good. We can go. We can keep going. And so I had that had that door open just a little bit, and I was able to continue because I so desperately wanted to continue with this. And then we got into the third step, and where I made that decision, and he told me, all you're doing is making a decision here. So that's it, okay? You're making a decision to invite this God of your understanding, whoever, whatever it may be, and into your life to guide you and shape your life from here. And so we did the third step prayer, and it was in a church. And I'm on my knees, holding hands with him, and which was out of my comfort zone. I loved how the chairs are spaced in here. There's a nice space between. I love that because it's like, boy, then I got my bubble. But that was out of my comfort zone. And of course, he knew the third step prayer by heart, and I had to read it. Now I have to say that before I did that, I was the biggest skeptic there ever was. I was convinced that this might work for you, but I really didn't know if it was going to work for me. I really did. I had my doubts. I didn't know. I didn't know. I was really had my doubts. And I told him about that. I said, I'm not sure, but I said I'm willing to try. And we did the third step prayer on our knees, holding hands, and I started to cry. And it was the first time that I had ever felt the presence of a power greater than myself. I felt that grace, that love, and that light of which I know now is God, was present. And I read something yesterday in one of my readings, is that I don't have to ask God to come in and help me, because the God of my understanding is always there. Always there. All I need to be is in a situation where I need that help, and it's there. Again, I always thought it was all about me. I had to wait till he was asked, till he was invited. I realized that he's cared and guided and protected me all this time. So here we are at the fourth step, because he told me, as it started out in the reading or just before, we needed to. This had to be followed by vigorous action, and so he told me to get a 5-subject notebook. Okay, I didn't realize I was going to need several. It's a good thing that I didn't know what I didn't know. That as he told me, he said, we're going to start this. You're going to just pay attention to what's in front of you. You're not going to worry about what's coming. And he told me, get some black pens. And I said, well, why black pens? Although I use black pens for work all the time. He said, well, because it says right in the reading today that we put this down in black and white. I said, okay, I'm willing. Because when we did the third step, we did that third step prayer, I was looking at my margin here, that I actually entered into what I recall as a covenant with my sponsor. And that covenant entered into with my sponsor and with the God of my understanding, that he asked if I would finish this work. And I said yes. I knew what the right answers were. I said yes. He said, and when I did finish this work, would I help another man through this process if I were asked? And I said yes. Figuring that, okay, yeah, of course. I mean, I need to say yes because I want to keep going. So I knew what the right answer was. And I figured, I'll never have to help anybody. That'll be fine. So here we are in the fourth step. And so he says, get the notebook, get the black pens. And every sponsor, I think, maybe does this a little differently. And he did it the way his sponsor had done it with him. And so, and the amazing thing is that the directions are all here. Who knew? Who knew, I mean, it's like every time I read it, in some ways, it's like reading it for the first time. Again, it goes back to the first step. It tells me right off, okay, that I have a physical allergy to alcohol, and that it's coupled with a mental obsession, which is so powerful that no physical Nothing in this physical world will relieve me of my alcoholism. I'm going to have to find a spiritual solution to relieve me of my alcohol problem. Okay? It tells me I'm going to have a psychic change. Okay? Change in personality. Sufficient to bring about, as it talks about in the appendix, sufficient to bring about the relief from my alcoholism. Okay? Right there, right out of the gate. It's telling me, it's not hiding it anywhere. It's amazing. It said, if you want to hide something from an alcoholic, put it in the big book. It's true because all those years I never understood. I never knew there was a chapter that said there is a solution. Never knew there was a chapter called that. So here we are doing the fourth step, and so again, it spells it out. He says on the top of course, he said, make your list of resentments. Okay, people, institutions, principles, anything that comes to mind. Now remember, this was the guy who thought I might come up with a dozen or 20. Well, there were a lot. I don't use the numbers. This is not a competition. There were a lot. And they went back, and one would come to mind, and then it would snowball from there. And so I made this list. It took a while. And I would meet with him regularly. And then he said, okay, once you've got your list down. I know some people, they split it up in different categories. He said, just let it go. He said, but before you do any of this, he said, every time you sit down to do any writing, he said, I want you to invite God in. You sit quietly, meditate. And I had several prayers. I always did the third step. Well, I still do. Third step prayer. He said, if you get up to get a glass of water, a cup of coffee, or use the bathroom, he said, you come back and sit down. He said, same thing. Do the third step prayer, sit quietly, invite God to guide your pen. And he said, oh yeah. And because it was important, because this isn't about Pete doing the writing. Okay, I merely hold the pen. And so I started doing it, and then I finished that list of resentments, and it talks about it again in here too in the reading today. And until later I realized that resentment is the number one offender. Destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I mean, because I always figured it was alcohol. But I know now, again from this work, that when I began to see the volume of what I was carrying with me, I mean, we're talking stuff that's 50, 60 years old, okay? And so I started to write this out, and he said, okay, now, then we get to we've done the resentments. He said, okay, now I want you to do the turnarounds for each one of these. I said, each one? Can I kind of group them? I'm just joking. No, actually I did that. Believe me, I was always looking. So he said, no. He said, and again, the directions are right here. Okay, he's at the top of the list. And again, everybody has their own way sponsor has their own way of doing it. And I actually numbered them for quick, easy reference. So if I need to go back and talk to him about something, I could find it from the list. And so. And he said, all right, where did it affect your self-esteem, your security, okay, money, or whatever, or your safety, your ambitions, my personal relations, my sex relations, okay? And then he said, at the top of the page, do that. And he said, under each one of those, he said, ask yourself as if in any of these things any fear was generated as a result of this. Well, there's a lot of fear. And he said, okay, now I'm going to have you do these, let me find it here, do these questions. And he said each one of those, he said the first question, said where were you selfish in relation to this resentment? So what did you want out of this? Okay. Well, I wanted Sue to like me. Okay. My resentment was she snubbed me. She didn't talk to me. Okay. I won't get into any details, but so the first question is, where was I selfish? What did I want in this? What did I want to get out of this? And of course, as a good alcoholic, always selfish. Always. So, I joke about it, saying it's all about me. Well, yeah, because it was. I joke about it so it would kind of make you think it wasn't. You'd think I was really humble and really what a great guy. Because how you thought about me was really, and still can be, is very important. Next question was, yeah, I can find it here. It's like, he said, where were you dishonest? And then when he said, now this is dishonesty, he said, what was the lie you told yourself? And so I always answered that question. What was the lie? Whoa. You know? The next question is, what was the truth? It was always the opposite of the lie. But you know which one I believed? The lie. I believed the lie. I created it, I believed it, I bought it, and it became the truth. I mean, so what are I so messed up? And then the next question is, where was I self-seeking? What was my action in this resentment? You know, did I say, unpleasant things about this young woman because she wouldn't go out with me, or did I, cast aspersions on her character? I mean, that's just an example, but I mean, what was my action? Okay, did I cheat him? Did I not pay him because I didn't like the way he treated me? So, and then the last question: where was I afraid? Again, another whoa. Because there was fear underlying every single thing. Every single thing, there was fear. Okay? And we'll get it, that'll come next week. And so I wrote out these questions for each one of my resentments. And as you might figure, that there was kind of a pattern that began to develop. A lot of stuff. I began to see, and I began to see that this was things that I was, like I said, I was carrying around for 55, 60 years, things that I thought, and 99% of them were probably totally inconsequential, okay? 99% of them were pretty much all up here, because it really got down to it. It had nothing to do with you, or what you did or didn't do. It's what I thought you did or didn't do, or it was all going on, it was in my mind. In my alcoholic mind. That was the alcoholic thinking. And that, to me, that's the insanity that we talk about in the second step. It's not all the crazy stuff that I did when I was under the influence of alcohol. Did some stupid stuff. Did not make terribly good decisions. But the insanity was the thinking that preceded that drink. And that is what I began to see here. And as I said, I want to get into the fear inventory. This was such a revelation to me, this fourth step. It was a lot of work. I won't kid you. It's a lot of work. They don't call it work for nothing. It's just the truth. But it was one of the best things, probably the best thing I've ever done. Best thing I've ever done. And it talks about, that we need to be thorough, painstakingly honest. And of course, as an alcoholic, my nature doesn't lend itself to be honest. So, and all of this is so critical. And for me it was because this is all part of that psychic change. Okay? Because I needed, for the first time in my life, the first time in Pete's life, this revealed the truth about Pete to me. And it was there in black and white. I wrote it down. I owned it. Okay? Writing it down is a very powerful exercise. Okay? Well, it's up here. I can make it into anything I want. I can dress it up. It can look pretty. Can look like a pretty good idea. But when I put it down, I write it in my own handwriting. It wasn't on a computer. I was writing it, and it was being, through the grace of God, this was being discharged. Because this darkness, I think, and this is all part of the darkness of my disease, and that when this darkness, you can call it evil, whatever you want, but this darkness that I was filled with, because my alcoholism, as my sponsor tells me, I have a disease that wants to kill me. Okay, albeit maybe doing it very slowly, but it does. And it won't be satisfied until it does. And to me, that disease is filled with darkness. And that darkness is that once that darkness is exposed to the sunlight of the Spirit, talks about in the reading today, okay, because I'd been in the dark. Life had been so incredibly dark, suicidal, depression, filled with anger and fear, terrified. I was terrified underneath, terrified, but yet I covered it up with rage. Rage was my answer to fear, because if I was angry, you would leave me alone. You'd stay away from me because you'd be afraid of me. But I was so filled with this darkness, and once this darkness is exposed to the sunlight of the Spirit, it's out in the light, it loses its power, and it no longer has any power over me. And so if you're thinking of doing this work, I loved coming in here this morning, and people were sitting reading their big books and maybe making some notes or something, and I said, there's no other meeting I go into other than Big Book Step Study where they're really looking at the solution. I am so grateful. If you're interested in doing this, and find a sponsor, because this is dangerous. For me, this was really dangerous territory to go into. I would not suggest you do it alone, and I wouldn't trust myself to do it alone. Okay, like I said, I'm the one who creates the lies, and I believe them, and it becomes the truth. And I could do that with all of this. But where I have my sponsor, he called me on it. He talked to me about things. Find a sponsor. Find someone who has done this work, to guide you through. And that was my sponsor told me. So I'm only your guide here. And he's been amazing. We've become friends since. But and so if you're interested, find someone. Start the work. It is the most rewarding, the most amazing thing that can happen. My life today is nothing what I have imagined. I have a relationship now with the God of my understanding, which I never thought would be possible. I never thought it would be possible. I have a grace and a feeling of well-being in my life that I had never thought was there. I never thought I could attain. So please do it. Because what this work has shown me is I'm no longer now in the darkness of the problem. I'm living in the light of the solution. And so that's it for me. God bless you all.